In the small, bustling village of Oko, nestled along the banks of the winding Imo River, there lived a man named Obi who was revered by his people for his profound wisdom and deep connection to the spiritual world. As the village elder and chief priest, Obi guided his community through the delicate balance of the natural and supernatural realms, using his extensive knowledge of traditional rituals and mystical practices to ensure the prosperity and well-being of all who lived under his watchful eye. Obi's reputation as a man of great power and influence had spread far beyond the borders of Oko, and many sought his counsel on matters ranging from the mundane to the arcane. Some came to him for advice on matters of the heart, while others entreated him to intervene in disputes or to divine the course of future events. And there were those who came seeking Obi's favor, hoping to leverage his spiritual connection for their own personal gain. Among these was a wealthy and ambitious merchant named Chioma, who had long coveted the respect and authority that Obi commanded within the village. Chioma had accumulated a vast fortune through his shrewd business dealings, but he craved something more, the kind of reverence and deference that only came with wielding true power, the kind of power that Obi possessed in abundance. One fateful day, Chioma sought an audience with the village elder, determined to strike a deal that would forever change the course of his life and that of his descendants. Honored Obi Chioma began, lowering himself in a deep bow as he entered the elder's modest but serene dwelling. "I come to you with a proposition that I believe will be of great benefit to us both." Obi regarded the merchant with a measured gaze, his weathered features betraying no hint of emotion. "Speak, Chioma, and let us see if your words hold any merit." Chioma could barely contain his excitement as he launched into his proposal. "You are a man of great wisdom and power, respected by all who know you. I, too, have found success in the material world, but I seek something more, the kind of influence and authority that you wield over this village and its people." He paused, gauging Obi's reaction, but the elder remained silent, his expression impassive. "I propose a pact," Obi Chioma continued, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "I will bestow upon you a great fortune, one that will ensure the prosperity of your family for generations to come. In return, I ask that you use your powers to bless my own descendants, guaranteeing them a future of wealth and success beyond their wildest dreams." Obi's brow furrowed slightly, a flicker of unease passing across his weathered features. "And what, exactly, do you mean by blessing your descendants, Chioma?" he asked, his voice firm and unwavering. "Why, nothing more than securing their place in this world," Obi the merchant replied, a sly grin spreading across his face. "With your guidance and the favor of the spirits, my family will be elevated above all others, destined for greatness beyond measure." Obi remained silent for a moment, his keen eyes studying the merchant's eager expression. He knew that there was more to Chioma's proposal than the man was willing to reveal, that the true nature of the blessing he sought was likely steeped in darkness and deceit. "And what of my own family?" Chioma, Obi asked, his voice low and measured. "What guarantee do I have that your blessing will not bring harm to those who are most dear to me?" Chioma waved a dismissive hand. "Harm? Perish the thought, my friend. All I seek is to ensure the prosperity and success of my own lineage. Your family will be untouched, their future secure under the watchful eye of the spirits." Obi's frown deepened, his misgivings growing stronger with each passing moment. He knew that the forces of the spirit world were not to be trifled with, that the consequences of making a pact with the wrong entity could be devastating, not only for himself but for all those he held dear. "I must decline your offer," Chioma, Obi said, his voice firm. "The powers I wield are not to be used for personal gain or to elevate one family above another. My duty is to serve the well-being of the entire village, not to cater to the selfish desires of a single individual." Chioma's face contorted with rage, his eyes narrowing to slits. "You fool," he spat, all pretense of civility abandoned. "Do you have any idea of the opportunity you are squandering? With my wealth and your powers, we could rule this village, this entire region, with an iron fist." "Enough," Chioma, Obi said, his voice stern. "I will not be party to your schemes, nor will I allow you to corrupt the sacred trust that has been placed in me by my people. Now, I must ask you to leave, before I am forced to take actions that neither of us will enjoy." Seething with fury, Chioma rose to his feet, his fists clenched at his sides. "Mark my words, Obi," he hissed, "you will come to regret this decision. I will find a way to get what I want, even if I have to rip it from your cold, dead hands." With that, the merchant stormed out of Obi's dwelling, his thunderous footsteps echoing through the silent streets of the village. Obi watched him go, a deep sense of unease settling in the pit of his stomach. He knew that Chioma was a dangerous man, driven by ambition and a thirst for power that knew no bounds, and he feared that the merchant's wounded pride would drive him to seek retribution, no matter the cost. In the days that followed, Obi's worst fears began to materialize. Whispers of Chukwoma's plot to undermine the elders' authority and seize control of the village spread like wildfire, sowing seeds of discord and mistrust among the once united community. Families that had lived in harmony for generations found themselves at odds, as Chukwoma's agents sowed rumors and accusations, pitting neighbor against neighbor in a desperate bid to weaken Obi's influence. The once vibrant marketplace became a battleground of suspicion and animosity, as the villagers eyed each other with growing distrust, uncertain of whom they could trust. Obi watched this unfolding chaos with a heavy heart, his own powers strained to the limit as he struggled to maintain order and restore the fragile balance that had once defined his beloved community. He knew that Chukwuma was the driving force behind this turmoil, and that the merchant would stop at nothing to achieve his twisted ambitions. One fateful night, as Obi was deep in meditation, seeking guidance from the spirits, he was visited by a presence unlike any he had ever encountered. A towering, shadow-wreathed figure materialized before him, its features obscured by a cloak of inky darkness. Obi, village elder and keeper of the sacred trust, the entity spoke, its voice a deep, resonant rumble that sent shivers down the old man's spine. "I have heard of your troubles, and I come to offer a solution, a pact that will grant you the power to vanquish your enemies and restore the harmony of your village." Obi's heart raced, his mind whirling with a mixture of trepidation and intrigue. He knew that whatever this entity was proposing, it would come at a great cost, perhaps even his own soul. "What is the nature of this pact you speak of?" Obi asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I am a deity of great power," Obi the entity replied, its presence growing ever more imposing. "I have watched the dealings of your people, and I have seen the greed and corruption that threatens to tear your community apart. In exchange for your devotion and the promise of your descendants' service, I will grant you the means to crush your enemies and secure the prosperity of your family for generations to come." Obi's brow furrowed in deep contemplation. He knew that the temptation of such power was great, and that it could be the key to restoring the peace and harmony that had once defined his village. But the weight of the entity's demands weighed heavily upon his conscience, for he understood the perilous nature of making a pact with a being whose true motives were shrouded in mystery. "And what, exactly, would be required of me and my descendants in this arrangement?" Obi asked, his voice tinged with trepidation. "Your devotion and the promise of your family's service," the entity replied, its tone brooking no argument. "In exchange, I will grant you the power to vanquish your enemies, to elevate your family above all others, and to ensure the prosperity of your lineage for generations to come." Obi considered the entity's words, his mind racing with the implications of such a pact. He knew that the consequences could be dire, that the price of such power could be the very souls of his descendants. But the thought of seeing his beloved village torn apart by Chukwuma's ambition was too much to bear. "And if I refuse?" Obi asked, his voice laced with trepidation. "Then your village and all that you hold dear will be consumed by the darkness," the entity rumbled, its presence growing ever more oppressive. "Chukwuma will stop at nothing to achieve his goals, and without my aid, you will be powerless to stop him." Obi's heart sank as he realized the gravity of the decision that lay before him. To accept the entity's offer would be to condemn his family to an uncertain future, one that could be fraught with darkness and despair. But to refuse would mean the certain destruction of everything he had sworn to protect. In the end, it was the thought of his beloved village, his loyal people, that tipped the scales. Obi knew that he could not stand by and watch as Chukwuma's ambition tore his community apart, no matter the personal cost. "I accept your pact, great deity," Obi said, his voice firm and resolute. "I will devote myself and my family to your service, if it means securing the future of my village and its people." The entity's presence seemed to expand, filling the small dwelling with a tangible aura of power and malevolence. "So be it," Obi it rumbled, its voice echoing with an otherworldly resonance. Your devotion and the service of your descendants are now mine. Use the power I grant you to crush your enemies and ensure the prosperity of your family, but remember the price of this pact is one that will be paid for generations to come. With those words, the entity vanished, leaving Obi alone in the dim, flickering light of his dwelling. The old man sank to his knees, his head bowed low, as the weight of his decision settled upon his shoulders. He knew that he had made a pact with a being whose true nature he could not fully comprehend, and that the consequences of his actions would reverberate through the ages. In the days that followed, Obi's power and influence within the village grew exponentially, as the entity's blessings manifested in ways that seemed almost miraculous. Chukwuma's schemes were thwarted at every turn, his supporters falling away as Obi's allies rallied to his cause. The once fractured community was restored to a semblance of its former unity, and the villagers looked upon their elder with renewed reverence and trust. But beneath the veneer of this newfound prosperity, a dark undercurrent began to take hold. Obi's family, once a picture of harmony and contentment, began to unravel as the weight of the pact's demands became increasingly apparent. Whispers of the entity's influence spread through the village, and some even began to question the elder's judgment, wondering if he had made a deal with a force that was beyond his control. As the years passed, Obi watched helplessly as his descendants fell under the sway of the entity's power. His children and grandchildren, once bright-eyed and full of promise, became increasingly withdrawn, consumed by a thirst for wealth and influence that seemed to know no bounds. And with each generation that passed, the entity's grip on the family tightened, until it became clear that the price of Obi's pact would be paid not by him, but by his children and their children's children, a curse that would haunt the family for generations to come. In the twilight of his life, as Obi lay on his deathbed, he was visited once more by the entity, its presence looming over him like a dark, inescapable shadow. "Your pact has been fulfilled," Obi the entity rumbled, its voice echoing with a cruel satisfaction. "Your family now belongs to me, and the blessings I have bestowed upon them will continue to shape their destiny for eternity." Obi's heart sank as he realized the full weight of his decision, the regret and sorrow etched upon his weathered features. "My people," he whispered, his voice trembling. "What will become of them?" The entity's laughter, a deep, resonant rumble, sent a chill down Obi's spine. "Your people will prosper, Obi, for as long as your family remains devoted to me," it replied. "But should they ever stray from the path I have set before them, the consequences will be dire." With those words, the entity vanished, leaving Obi alone to face the consequences of his pact. In the end, the village elder knew that the price of his decision had been far greater than he could have ever imagined, a burden that would continue to haunt his family for generations to come. And so it was that the curse of the three daughters was born, a legacy of Obi's desperate bargain with the entity, one that would echo through the ages, forever shaping the lives of his descendants and the community he had sworn to protect. Episode 2: The Sisters' Struggles. In the heart of Umuagu village, nestled among the lush green hills of southeastern Nigeria, stood the modest but welcoming home of the Nwosu family. The sound of laughter often filled the air as the three Nwosu sisters Chioma, Ngozi, and Oluchi went about their daily lives, unaware of the dark cloud that loomed over their futures. Ezekiel and Adora Nwosu had raised their daughters with love and care, instilling in them the values of hard work, kindness, and respect for their community. As the girls blossomed into young women, their parents swelled with pride, certain that their daughters would go on to lead happy, fulfilled lives. Chioma, the eldest at 25, was known throughout the village for her quick wit and nurturing nature. Her dark eyes sparkled with intelligence, and her warm smile put everyone at ease. From a young age, she had shown a passion for learning, often spending hours poring over books borrowed from the village school. Ngozi, 2 years younger than Chioma, was the artist of the family. Her delicate features were often furrowed in concentration as she worked on her latest creation. Whether it was sketching the vibrant village market or painting the sunset over the nearby river, Ngozi had a gift for capturing the beauty of the world around her. Oluchi, the youngest at 20, was a free spirit with a melodious laugh that seemed to brighten even the gloomiest day. Her curiosity about the natural world was insatiable, and she could often be found wandering the forests surrounding Umuagu, learning about the plants and their medicinal properties from the village elders. As the sisters entered their 20s, the topic of marriage began to dominate conversations in their household and throughout the village. In Umuagu, as in many Nigerian communities, marriage was seen not just as a union between two people, but as a joining of families and a crucial step in continuing ancestral lines. Ezekiel and Adaora, like most parents in the village, were eager to see their daughters married to good men who would respect and cherish them. They began to entertain visits from potential suitors and their families, hopeful that their beloved daughters would soon find happiness in marriage. Chioma's story. Chioma was the first to experience the joy of falling in love. Emeka, a young teacher from a neighboring village, had come to Umuagu to help at the local school. From the moment Chioma laid eyes on him, she felt a connection that she had never experienced before. Emeka was tall and handsome, with a gentle demeanor that matched Chioma's own. They bonded over their shared love of learning and their desire to make a difference in their community through education. Chioma found herself looking forward to their conversations after school, where they would discuss everything from teaching methods to their dreams for the future. As the weeks turned into months, it became clear to everyone in Umuagu that Chioma and Emeka were meant for each other. Ezekiel and Adaora were overjoyed to see their eldest daughter so happy, and they welcomed Emeka into their home with open arms. The day Emeka asked for Chioma's hand in marriage was one of celebration in the Nwosu household. Chioma's eyes shone with happiness as Emeka presented her with a simple but beautiful engagement ring, a family heirloom passed down through generations. Plans for the wedding began in earnest. The entire village buzzed with excitement as preparations were made for what promised to be one of the most joyous occasions Umuagu had seen in years. Chioma threw herself into the planning, working alongside her mother and sisters to ensure every detail was perfect. The night before the wedding, Chioma could hardly sleep, her mind filled with dreams of the life she and Emeka would build together. She imagined their own home, filled with the laughter of children, and the satisfaction of working side by side to educate the next generation. But as the sun rose on what should have been the happiest day of Chioma's life, a sense of unease settled over the Nwosu household. Hours passed, and there was no sign of Emeka or his family. The guests began to arrive, but the groom was nowhere to be found. Ezekiel sent messengers to Emeka's village, fearing that perhaps there had been an accident on the road. But when the messengers returned, their news was even more baffling and heartbreaking. Emeka and his entire family had left their village in the middle of the night. Their home was empty, with no note or explanation left behind. It was as if they had vanished into thin air, leaving behind a devastated bride and a village full of confused and saddened guests. Chioma was inconsolable. For days she refused to leave her room, her dreams of a happy future shattered. Her family and friends tried to comfort her, but how could they explain something so inexplicable? As the weeks passed, Chioma slowly began to emerge from her grief. She threw herself into her work at the school, finding solace in the eager minds of her students. But the pain of Emeka's disappearance never fully left her, and she often found herself wondering what had gone wrong and if she would ever find love again. Ngozi's journey. While Chioma was grappling with the aftermath of her broken engagement, Ngozi was experiencing her own blossoming romance. Chidi, a young farmer from Umuagu, had been admiring Ngozi's artwork for months before he finally found the courage to speak to her. Chidi was different from the other young men in the village. Where they saw Ngozi's art as a pleasant hobby, Chidi recognized the depth of her talent. He would spend hours watching her paint, marveling at the way she could bring a blank canvas to life with her brushes and colors. Ngozi found herself drawn to Chidi's quiet strength and his appreciation for her passion. They would take long walks together, Ngozi sketching the landscapes while Chidi talked about his dreams of modernizing farming techniques to help the village prosper. Their courtship was a slow and steady one, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared dreams. Ngozi began to incorporate elements of farm life into her paintings, inspired by Chidi's stories and the beauty she saw in the fields he tended. Unlike the whirlwind romance of Chioma and Emeka, Ngozi and Chidi's relationship grew gradually, deepening with each passing day. Ezekiel and Adaora watched with quiet joy, relieved to see Ngozi finding happiness after witnessing Chioma's heartbreak. As their relationship progressed, Chidi began to talk about marriage. He spoke of building a home where Ngozi could have a studio of her own, a place where she could create her art while still being a part of village life. Ngozi's heart swelled at the thought of a future that allowed her to balance her two loves, her art and Chidi. But just as Ngozi and Chidi were beginning to make concrete plans for their future, tragedy struck. Chidi fell ill with a mysterious ailment that left him weak and feverish. The village healer was summoned, but despite her best efforts, Chidi's condition continued to deteriorate. Ngozi spent every moment she could by Chidi's bedside, her art supplies forgotten as she focused all her energy on willing him to recover. She prayed to every deity she knew, promising anything if only Chidi would be spared. For a brief moment, it seemed as though her prayers had been answered. Chidi's fever broke, and he opened his eyes, smiling weakly at Ngozi. But the relief was short-lived. Within hours, Chidi's condition worsened dramatically, and before the sun had set, he had slipped away, leaving Ngozi shattered and bewildered. The loss of Chidi hit Ngozi hard. She stopped painting, unable to find beauty in a world that had taken away the man she loved. Her vibrant colors were replaced by somber grays and blacks, reflecting the darkness that had settled over her heart. Ezekiel and Adora watched helplessly as their middle daughter retreated into herself, her usual cheerfulness replaced by a quiet melancholy. They tried to comfort her, but Ngozi seemed unreachable, lost in a grief that no one could fully understand. Oluchi's experience. As the youngest of the Nwosu sisters, Oluchi had watched her older siblings' romantic struggles with a mixture of sympathy and apprehension. She had always been more interested in her studies of traditional medicine than in finding a husband, but as she entered her 20s, she couldn't help but feel the pressure from the village to settle down. Oluchi was considered one of the most beautiful young women in Umuagu. Her clear, melodious voice and infectious laugh made her popular among the village youth, and her knowledge of herbal remedies made her respected by the elders. It seemed that everywhere she went, admiring glances followed. Unlike her sisters, Oluchi didn't have one particular suitor. Instead, she found herself the object of attention from several young men in the village. There was Ikenna, the son of the village chief, whose confidence and charm had turned the heads of many young women. Obinna, a skilled hunter, would bring her rare herbs from his forest expeditions, hoping to impress her with his knowledge of the land. And then there was Emeka, a quiet but kind-hearted carpenter who would carve beautiful figurines for her. At first, Oluchi was flattered by the attention. She enjoyed the conversations with Ikenna about village politics, the walks in the forest with Obinna, and the thoughtful gifts from Emeka. But as time went on, she began to notice a strange pattern. Whenever one of her suitors seemed on the verge of declaring his intentions, something would inexplicably change. Ikenna, who had been on the verge of asking for her hand in marriage, suddenly announced that he had decided to leave the village to study in the city. Obinna, after months of courting Oluchi, abruptly declared that he had received a vision from his ancestors telling him to remain unmarried. Emeka, sweet and dependable Emeka, simply stopped coming around, with no explanation given. Oluchi was puzzled and hurt by these sudden changes. She wondered if there was something wrong with her, some flaw that only became apparent when men got too close. The whispers in the village grew louder, with people wondering why such a beautiful and accomplished young woman couldn't seem to keep a suitor. As the months passed, Oluchi found herself withdrawing from social gatherings, tired of the pitying looks and well-meaning but hurtful comments. She threw herself into her study of traditional medicine, spending more and more time with the village elders, learning their ancient wisdom. The Nwosu family's growing concern. As the strange pattern of broken engagements and failed courtships continued, Ezekiel and Adora Nwosu became increasingly worried about their daughters' futures. In a society where marriage and motherhood were seen as the primary roles for women, the inability of their daughters to secure husbands was not just a personal disappointment, but a source of shame for the entire family. Ezekiel, a proud man who had always held his head high in the village, found himself avoiding the eyes of his neighbors. He could feel their questioning gazes, sense their whispered speculations about what might be wrong with his daughters or his family. Adora, her heart breaking for her children, turned to prayer. She spent hours in the village church, lighting candles and begging for divine intervention. She consulted with the village priestess, asking if perhaps an angry spirit was causing their family's misfortune. The sisters, once so close, found themselves drifting apart, each lost in her own pain and confusion. Chioma buried herself in her work at the school, staying late into the evening to grade papers and prepare lessons. Ngozi's once bright paintings took on a somber tone, filled with shadowy figures and stormy skies. Oluchi retreated to the forests, spending more and more time alone among the trees and herbs that didn't judge or whisper. Family meals, once a time of laughter and shared stories, became quiet, tense affairs. The topic of marriage, once discussed with excitement and hope, was now carefully avoided, the pain too raw and too confusing to address directly. As the years passed, the Nwosu sisters watched as their peers married and started families of their own. Baby naming ceremonies and weddings became bittersweet occasions, reminders of the lives they had dreamed of but seemed destined never to have. The village's reaction. In a small, close-knit community like Umuagu, it was impossible for the Nwosu family's struggles to go unnoticed. At first there was sympathy for the family, particularly after Chioma's dramatic experience with the vanishing groom. People brought food and offered words of comfort, assuring the family that it was simply a streak of bad luck that would soon pass. But as time went on and all three sisters remained unmarried, the whispers began. Some speculated that the family must have offended the ancestors or run afoul of a powerful curse. Others, less kind, suggested that there must be something wrong with the girls themselves. Perhaps they were too proud, too educated for their own good. The effect on the Nwosu family's social standing was gradual but unmistakable. Invitations to village events became less frequent. People were polite when they encountered the family, but conversations were briefer, more guarded. Some parents even warned their sons away from the Nwosu girls, fearing that whatever misfortune had befallen them might be contagious. For Ezekiel and Adora, this subtle ostracism was almost unbearable. They had always been respected members of the community, proud of their contributions to village life. Now they felt like outsiders in their own home. The sisters' individual struggles. As the years passed, each of the Nwosu sisters found different ways to cope with their situation. Chioma, the eldest, threw herself into her role as a teacher with a fervor that both impressed and concerned her colleagues. She arrived at the school before dawn and often stayed long after the other teachers had gone home. Her lessons were meticulously planned, her classroom impeccably organized. She volunteered for every committee, chaperoned every school event, and took on additional tutoring for struggling students. On the surface, Chioma appeared to be thriving in her career. Her students adored her, and parents praised her dedication. But those closest to her could see the toll her relentless pace was taking. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her once ready smile became a rarer sight. At night, when the house was quiet, Adora sometimes heard muffled sobs coming from Chioma's room, the sound of a heart still broken from a betrayal she couldn't understand.